that you guys have joined, and thank you so much for being part of this FinTech Festival from Business World. Uh, let's start from the very basics, and I want to take our panelists little bit down the memory lane, not too long back, just 3 4 years back, maybe precisely in 2016. I would like your views on the linkage, any if any, between the announcement of demonetization and the rise of fintech thereon, and the kind of numbers we are seeing in terms of online spends and digital transaction happening. So, who would you like to take this up first?
I,
Nitya?
I can start. Yeah, sure. So yeah, of course, demonetization was this massive step in 2016. And I think there are two important lessons from it. The first is obviously during demonetization and maybe 3 months following that, we had a big dip in cash in the market, whether it's cash for offline commerce or online commerce. But soon after, cash came back up, right? So even till pre-COVID times, the amount of cash people were using to buy things online and offline kind of stayed the same, even demonetization times. And I think the lesson from that is anything that consumers adopt is about consumer experience, right? I mean, of course, the government or regulators can force anything, and sometimes it does have an impact, but eventually it's all about consumer experience. It's about user experience. It's about consumers, having an option that they want to use, as opposed to something being forced into it. So that's kind of like on one part, my view on demonetization. The second is demonetization definitely brought a very important policy perspective of the government to the future, which is government was really focused around the cashless economy, right? And I think demonetization was definitely a big drastic effect, but a lot of things that were happening in the background is kind of like what has led us to where we are today, which is the whole Aadhaar, UPI, everybody having the bank account, Jan Dhan Yojana, the whole 9 yards, which basically means in our country right now, we have the best infrastructure for financial services, right? We are the most banked country in the world. We have the best banking infrastructure, and it is first class. We still need to construct user experiences on top of it for consumers to adopt it, whether it's payments or neo-banking and so many other things. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, demonetization was about really government having all the infrastructure that they were building, and not demonetization itself, because it itself did not, I think, move the needle.
Yeah, so my follow-up question in addition to that, before Yogi ji can answer about demonetization and its impact on rise of this fintech world we are seeing, especially the online transaction, the digital transaction, and which is widely now happening across bigger towns and smaller towns, is what was the situation? Had this demonetization not happened, do you foresee, like in hindsight, things would have grown for this sector, and that the digital payments would have seen the kind of growth that we have seen as the numbers reflect? Yogi ji, this I'm
Yeah,
asking.
sure. Okay, so Ashish, I don't really believe that. Um I don't really believe that the amount or the effect of demonetization would have been creating a very different view on the fintech, which is there at this point in time. Whether demonetization had happened or had not happened, I think the entire world was moving towards a very digitized part of the economy, right? So, and I think what COVID just did to that is it accelerated a bunch of digital payments and user experience on the digital journeys and accelerated by maybe 5 years or 10 years. I think it's a hard thing to say whether it's 5 years or 10 years, but exactly what it has done is that people have moved away from a physical store perspective. People are thinking more about digital, not only in payments but also on shopping as well, right? So I think those are the big trends which are coming out, that people are trying to see that how you can avoid a physical touch point, how you can avoid a physical contact and complete the process or the journey in a digital format, right? So if you look at the latest numbers which are coming out from UPI, there are some 4 lakh crore plus payments which are happening on a monthly basis, which have been unheard of, right? So the work which the government has done, as Nitya was also explaining, in the digitization of the economy, the JAM thing which has come out, which is the Jan Dhan Yojana, the Aadhaar, the mobile, and the entire experience which the government has tried to set up this massive infrastructure on which we are sitting on, is probably very unique in the world at this point in time. So I think what digitization, what demonetization did or not did for the fintechs and the digital economy which we are sitting on at this point of time, I think is hard to say. But at the same time, I think a combination of things which have happened over the last 4 or 5 years, which includes the UPI, the JAM, the formalization of the economy, a combination of GST. So if you put all of these things put together, I think these are the catalyst of the change which is out there. And as I said, COVID did something which the government would have not done, right? So
let's come to COVID. COVID was the favorite question to ask everybody. How things have changed.
I'll not steal the thunder from that question that you want to ask, but my point was that look, what COVID did to digital was what the government would have spent another 5 years. People are thinking about UPI payments. Even if somebody wants to pay a grocery or even a vegetable purchase, people are saying, okay, can I pay you via my Google Pay account or some wallet? So the entire concept of using cash has gone away. So I think it's a combination of all the steps, and not just the demonetization has basically helped the most.
True. Deviji, your company is like kind of a very specialist in a very specialized space, targeting the school-going children and providing them with the fees for the entire year, etc. What were the reasons for you to get into this? Because if I'm not wrong, your company started in 2017. This is after. So my context behind asking to start this discussion, the demonetization was simple. That I have seen over my various interactions with people in this space that a lot of these companies who are right now successfully doing and taking on the baton of this fintech industry and carrying on it with it, many of them started around that time. It's like 2015, 16, 17. So what were your main reasons for getting into this particular niche segment?
Yeah, sure. So I think getting into the niche segment is probably an answer to that. What are the trends that we might see in the fintech sector going forward, right? Because you may see a lot of fintech companies right now, and you rightly said in last 4-5 years, there are a lot of startups in the fintech areas which has come up catering to different niche, right? Because banks were basically catering to entire spectrum, and they were not basically trying to do justice to each and every sector and the people who can get affordable finance, right? So for us, if you look at, we actually started as a P2P lending company in 2017. So that was basically the trend that time we started, and then after that RBI has came up with its own regulations, and because of that the business for the P2P lending segment was limited, because the amount of investment that somebody can do, the amount of borrowing that somebody can do in a platform, P2P platform, was very, very limited. Now it has been, RBI understood now, they have increased it. But when we started the company, we thought that we will probably make the next unicorn in India probably in 2-3 years, because the potential was so high. But RBI actually restricted everything. But while we are doing that, the P2P lending and transaction in our platform, we saw that our investors, who are basically the individual investors, they are not institutional investors in a P2P segment. We saw that there is a very high confidence they have in the education sector. Okay. And then we pivoted the idea, why we still run the P2P, but we pivoted the idea and we saw a market that which nobody was doing, is ideally providing an affordable fee financing solution for K-12 segment. Okay, preschools to 12. There are SDFC Credila, there are banks, there are other companies who do it for higher education. Nobody in India has done it in the school segment, right? And we were India's first company, I'm proud to say that, who actually did that. And then we were selected by Google because in 2018, the theme of Google was companies, they selected startups, the theme was solve for India. So it's a typical problem which you're solving from India, and it's a typical fintech which is targeting to a very niche segment, as you have already said. So it came actually from an idea of a pivot rather than the core company. We still run both the companies. Our P2P company still is a supplier to our this education financing vertical. We have other partnerships like we have ICICI Bank, a lot of NBFCs where we raise funds and basically give the supply to them, supply to our this entity. But this is how we started, and right now we are probably the most leading company in this segment right now in India.
Nitya ji, your company's name is Simple, and we are talking about simplifying transactions. Can you run us through kind of innovations or kind of challenges that you faced, and from based on the customer feedback of doing online transaction, what was there in the initial days, how things have progressed as we speak till date? 3 or 4 things which you can give as an example of the problems you faced and the solutions you provided. Nitya, you are on mute.
Yes, sorry about that. So basically, if you think about what is happening in the world of e-commerce, we are focused on e-commerce right now. So if you look at what's going on in the world of e-commerce in India or around the world, you see 2 trends. First is purchases are led on mobile phones. So mobile commerce is e-commerce. So for instance, in India, 90% of all transactions are done on mobile phones. So that's number 1. The problem is, out of 100 people who come to a mobile phone to make a purchase, only 1% buy. So which means there is 99% people who fall off the funnel, right? So only 1% conversion. And if you think about why that happens, it's really a bunch of frictions that happen between a consumer wanting to do a transaction online and actually completing it, which is number 1, trust. Do I trust e-commerce or this retailer that I'm about to buy from? Some large retailers like Zomato's, Big Basket, and Amazon, large companies have over time built trust in e-commerce with consumers. But when you think about smaller, newer merchants like direct-to-customer e-commerce retailers, while their products are good, their intention are good, their customer service is terrific, consumers are still little reluctant in buying from them, and therefore the trust comes into this question. Second is any question around, okay, well, if I buy and if I need to return, will my refund be in real time, etc., etc. So basically, and then of course at the final point of checkout, where I have to enter a password, transaction can fail. It's a bunch of process, right? Basically, what happens is when you think about a consumer who's buying things online, they are typically young millennials, urban, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 city consumers, and they have very high expectation of user experience on mobile. But when they are buying online, typically, there's just so many friction points that they encounter that basically leads them to abandon the cart. And that's where Simple comes in. What Simple does is what we say is Simple is a way to buy anything on the internet with 1 click, and you can just pay later. It's very much like, if you remember the khata that we all run with the local kirana store or the milkman or whatever, we kind of ask the question, can we build a khata for the internet where consumers and merchants can run khata for each other, and Simple can be the platform so that consumers get 1 bill for everything, and identity, risk, and trust can reside at the network level. And so basically what Simple does is it's a 1-click checkout. It's very easy to use Simple. It has a lot of buyer protection features, which allows consumers to feel more trust, etc. And then of course it's pay later, so that if there is ever a budgeting need, consumers can just buy now and then pay later within 15 days. So that's kind of like what Simple is. And it's really about moving the e-commerce from desktop to mobile, and from e-commerce as a logistic utility use case to experiential e-commerce, where consumers really demand high quality consumer experiences, right? So that's kind of like what we are seeing in the market. Consumers asking for 1-click checkouts, easy, very high quality trust and buyer protection. And merchants want to provide that, and that's a gap we are filling in the market.
And in terms of innovations, are there any stories, like any specific examples of hurdles faced and solutions provided at the back-end side? I mean, customers see the front end. They just want the user experience to be very simple, nice, easy to use, easy to understand. But at the back end, Does something come to your mind which you tackled and
Yeah,
provided a solution?
absolutely. To provide anything simple in the front end, the back end is very complicated typically, right? So I'll give you one example, and this is something that we learned as we were building Simple, right? So when you think about a typical online grocery use case, so let's assume you're buying grocery, whether it could be chicken or tomatoes or whatever, right? And typically when you buy something for, let's say, 1 kg, when they eventually cut the chicken up or they fill up the tomato, it's typically not 1 kg, right? It'll be 950 grams, 900 grams. And let's say your bill is 600 rupees, right? Typically what you will see is when they will measure it, eventually the bill will be 550 rupees or 575 rupees or whatever. And, they've charged you 600 rupees now. Now 25 rupees or 50 rupees have to be returned back to you, which is a nightmare, right? I mean, so, credit cards, UPI typically takes anywhere from 7 to 10 days to refund, etc. And it's just like it's never a lot of money, but it's a constant pain in your mind, right? It's just like something that bothers you. And then sometimes retailer asks you to put it in the wallet and so on, right? As a consumer, I just want my money back, right? With Simple, because it's a bill, it's really a bill, the merchants, retailers can themselves downward adjust the bill, right? So for instance, if you bought chicken for 600 rupees, and if I'm giving you chicken for 590 rupees, I can downward adjust it bill from 600 to 590, so that you don't even have to pay more than you are supposed to, right? Now, it sounds like a very small thing, but when you are buying things online and really building trust and providing that type of user experience to consumers who are buying things online all the time, this goes a long way because people don't have to worry about these type of things.
Okay, thanks. Yogi ji, your company is targeting basically millennials, working professionals, and there are several others. If I'm not wrong, your space is getting cluttered. There are more companies and more competition. How do you compete then? Because everybody is providing the same thing, and I've interviewed a couple of them who are, I don't want to name here. So how do you offer differentiation, and is that a challenge for your potential customers going forward?
Sure. So look, great question, Ashish. The point that we have out here is that there is a very large market, and it's not like one leader will take the entire market on. So you need multiple differentiation companies with multiple differentiated products to make sure that you're able to meet various demands of the consumers, right? So given the size of the opportunity which is out there, or the amount of consumers which are out there looking for credit, is way beyond just a single fintech company or a single bank to manage that, right? And thank God there are multiple companies. Otherwise, it's not even an industry to start with, right? So you don't want to be a loner in a space for yourself. So we look at competition like that. Look, at least there is some industry being created because of like-minded people, but at the same time there is competition which cannot be ignored. So that keeps you on your toes. So what you have to make sure to keep alive or keep yourself floating is to constantly look at products that you're offering to your consumers. Look at year-on-year basis, how do you innovate those products to make sure that with changing demands, changing behavior, changing trends, are you able to come out with those differentiated products on a year-on-year basis? And as the consumer graduates with you, right, so there will be products that you would need to make sure that the new consumers are being attracted to, but at the same time you can't forget the consumers which are there with you, right? So you have to make sure that you have great products for them, that they look up to you every time when there is a need. So innovation is the key for sustaining, not only in fintechs but also in the large market space which is out there. And if you don't innovate, I think the old products and the technology, you will just get killed with that. So I think that's the foundation with which this company has got created. And as a matter of fact, we do take pride that, look, after every quarter or every 6 months, we have been able to innovate our product strategy, looking at extending tenors to looking at giving credit on. So we were probably one of the first companies, not only probably in India, but also in the world, to get an integration done with Google Pay. So now you can get your credit done into your UPI backed account. We have some very innovative products where you can do a combination of PL and BNPL put together. So innovation is the key. So if you don't innovate, you're a dinosaur very quickly.
Well said. Devi ji, I want you to tell us about this COVID period and any specific interesting incidents which you had observed with parents in your category. How did this period help your business? I'm sure schools were not happening, but fees were being coming in. And any interesting incidents or anecdotes you can remember?
Yeah, the first interesting thing is when people who are actually getting worried in the COVID period, we are the only company who were not worried because because money was coming. Actually, we saw a growth in the number of applications, right? Because a lot of people actually lost job during COVID, right?
True.
And that actually increased, and the only thing they cannot compromise is basically their kids' school fees, right?
True.
So we actually saw an increase in loan applications. So COVID has been actually given business to us, but nonetheless, that is main interesting thing. Of course, the second thing that COVID did to us, we used to have like a lot of our business development sales guy traveling across India to close the B2B sales ideally. Because our product is a B2B2C product, right? We reach to parents via school. So we need to have a partnership with the schools first. And we used to spend a lot of money on traveling and expenses and all those stuff. And believe me, since this is a need for the schools, it's a win-win situation that we create for parents, schools, and us. So the schools were ready to now sign the agreements digitally. So what we did, actually, we created a module where everything can be digitally done, okay? And that's actually saved us our expenses. It's an interesting thing. So we are doing more business, expenses is getting less. So ideally your profit anyway increases a little bit in terms of margin, right? Yeah, those are the two I would like to name. Yeah.
Sure. Nitya, how is this pay later concept panning out in the West? Are we at par with them? Is that trend has taken, like they have moved ahead and we are catching up? Where do you see the buy now, pay later trend happening vis-a-vis in the global perspective for Indian audience?
Yeah. So if you look at various parts of the world, Europe or some parts of Europe, Northern Europe and Australia, just to give you a sense, 20% of all e-commerce transactions in Germany are done with pay later. Almost 25% of all transactions in Scandinavia, Denmark, Sweden, and so on, e-commerce transactions are done with pay later. I think the number in Australia is about 15 to 20%. In the US, that number is about 1%. In India, it's probably 1.1% right now, 0.2, something like that. I don't know. So it's very different, and obviously, as you can imagine, it's happening around the world. So it's happening in Japan, it's happening in Australia, it's happening, of course, in India, it's happening in other parts of Asia, Latin America, US, and so on. And different markets are at different stages of adoption based on the market structures. This product works really well when there is a lot of fragmented market, a lot of market participants, and so on. And therefore, different markets are slightly different. But one thing is very clear. There is a secular shift in how millennial consumers want to buy for things online. Whether they're using pay later for convenience or what we call pay later for effortless budgeting, right? So when you think about Simple's product, it is something that consumers use to buy typically food on Zomato, grow vegetables on Big Basket, something on Dunzo, book a flight on Make My Trip, etc. And it's really your charge card. Consumers are buying something, putting it in a bill, and then paying it off. For some other markets, people are using it for slightly more affordable purchases. But yeah, I mean, you're seeing a secular increase of buy now, pay later. And I think, as I said, right, consumers want easy, high amount of transparency, no late fees. And one thing that we are obviously seeing is obviously in India, credit card penetration is very, very low. But there are markets like US and Australia and some parts of Europe where credit cards are there or people can get it. Credit is not the problem. The problem is the product that we know as credit card typically ends up being fairly bad financially for the consumer, right? If you revolve on a credit card, you're paying almost 36% annual interest rate. That is nothing close to financial suicide, right? I mean, no one should ever in their right mind ever do it. But the whole product has so many layers of information that people don't realize that, right? And it feels good to do your minimum payment and just revolve. And buy now pay later is the difference, right? I mean, there is, there are guardrails, right? You have to pay in 15 days or 3 months or whatever it is, right? And consumers know exactly what they're getting into. And it's very clear that consumers, whether in the West or in East or in India, are really, asking for high quality user experiences online. They want trust, they want convenience, and they want to use, affordability features, but they don't want to get into debt traps. They don't want to pay very high interest rate or don't know what they're getting into, right? And I think that's why we are seeing buy now pay later coming up very quickly in India, but also around the world.
And what would you see the major one or two major differences between a credit card user and a pay later model? Because right now the penetration may be low, but as the country progresses in next 5 years, the number of users of credit card or digital credit card is supposed to go up. How does one operate in that environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem that when you think about the credit card, right, there are a couple of issues in the operating model. The first problem is that the cost of customer acquisition and the cost of underwriting is very, very high, because of which you have to give people large lines of credit to start with. Otherwise, you will, it's just not NPV positive, right? Whereas in buy now pay later, typically the discovery, the acquisition, everything happens on the checkout pages, and therefore the cost of customer acquisition is very, very low, right? Just to give you a sense, a typical credit card customer the cost of customer acquisition would be anywhere from 3,000 rupees to 6,000 rupees, roughly. For something like Simple, it's going to be 60 rupees, right? So that's the difference. The second is but you're right? I mean, this penetration will increase, and I don't think, at least in the next 5 years, the question is not buy now pay later or credit card. It's both. The market is, we have 70% cash in e-commerce. Like, imagine that, right? And I think we need a lot of innovation on consumer experiences, and that's something we are seeing, especially during COVID, that consumers want to not necessarily use cash on delivery, right? I mean, there's this urban legend that people use black money and all that stuff, online purchases. To some extent it's maybe true, but to a large extent, it's not like you're using 200 rupees to buy food or taking Uber ride for 70 rupees and spending your black money, right? It's really, when people use cash on delivery online, they feel more trust. They feel more control of the transaction. That is the problem statement. And something like Simple Pay Later provides that sense of control, security, trust when people are buying online. And we expect that should increase, adoption and online transactions. By the way, credit cards do the same, right? Credit card comes with a lot of buyer protection, fraud protection, etc., which typically debit cards do not. Debit cards, UPI, it's really a debit product, right? Money is gone out of a bank account, and then it's your problem, right? So, it's super important in payment products to build buyer protection features where consumers feel safe now, right? And I think that's super important to be able to build, and that's what we are doing. We are a layer of trust between their bank account and online commerce.
Okay. Yogi ji, would you like to comment on the regulatory side of the business? Does your business have any kind of regulatory framework, safeguards built into the business you do, or is it too safe? Because all these new age fintech company lending to millennials are already starting out with a lot of safety checks right at the background. You know who you are lending, and the lender know from where he wants the money. But overall, what is your take on the overall scenario? Is there enough regulations and safeguards built into it? What are the 2 or 3 things you would see going forward if you had your way?
Sure. So look, the regulations on digital lending have been in the news for the last 8 weeks, 12 weeks for the right and the wrong reasons as well, right? So there is a regulation which is out there, which is the RBI, which is looking at all the lending activities in India, right? So that's the regulation which is out there. But look, fintech and the entire digital payment systems have emerged in a way where the regulator is trying to catch up at this point in time. There are some working committees which are being created. There is some guidance which has come out from the RBI. So it's a bit of a catch-up game as far as the regulators are concerned. But is there a regulation which is out there? The answer is yes. is it completely bulletproof? I think the regulator is trying to do this at this point in time, and there's a working committee which was set up, I think 3 weeks or 4 weeks before, and they have a total 90 days to come out with their report. So I think as the change in business is happening, the regulator is also kind of changing and trying to come up with something. But the regulators cannot change as much as what the tech does on a day-to-day basis. So it's a bit of an always catch-up game. But that's I think something which we are all adopted to and seems like normal for us.
And how do you explain this constant message which I see in websites of such companies? If you don't have CIBIL score,
some amazing other credit bureaus as well which are out there. But look, there are various kind of credit decisioning processes which are out there. There are some banks and financial institutions which only rely on these bureaus. There are fintech companies like ourselves which are looking at some alternate data on the consumer and looking beyond the credit bureau scores of people. So you can't say that what is good and what is bad. It's ultimately upon the company, which is the lending company, and what are their policies and procedures to lend money. But what I can tell you is that if everybody is looking at the same bureau score and you're creating a company which is also looking at the bureau score before lending, then there's no innovation which is out there. So if you look at a company like ourselves, we would take a lending decision before looking at your bureau score, right? So that's I think that's what the differentiation is which is out there.
Wonderful. Devji, can you just throw some light on you have a very niche segment. There's nothing to compare. No other players are there doing this. So how have schools responded, especially in smaller towns? Because your website says you are in 40 plus towns. Yes. I'm sure a lot of them would be smaller towns. Yes. So which is the smallest town where you have reached, and what is the feedback, that on ground feedback from the school side? How are they taking, or is school not a partner in this business?
Yeah. So the smallest town we have gone is actually in the northeast in Siliguri itself.
Oh, right. Siliguri is a big town.
Right. I think schools, there is a need for them anyway. So FinanceSphere, currently, if you look at, though we are doing the business of just fee financing, the vision of FinanceSphere is basically there is anything related to financial transaction, be it schools fees, be it insurance of their premises or the buses and all those things, right? Anything related to ERPs, anywhere, or collection, right? Anywhere the school's transaction is involved in terms of money, FinanceSphere has to have a touch point there, right? That is one of the vision of FinanceSphere. So to answer your question, the schools definitely basically need a money in terms of working capital, because the behavior of people, if you look at schools, payments are being generally made in a quarterly basis, right? Yeah. And 70 to 80% of people, and I live in a post society in Hyderabad here, even if people have money, they will prefer to give the money in quarterly basis, because that is the smartness of spending money, right? There is no need to pay money in the beginning, where you can do it in a installment, right? Yeah. So this concept we have taken up to the next level, where we are saying to the school that the money will give you on day one. If the parent is defaulting, the risk is mine, okay? And a lot of people don't know what we do is basically we also protect the parents. So in our system, let's say you are a parent who is taking a loan, and unfortunately something happens to you die. There is no company in the entire world probably is doing this. We take care of the school's kids' education till class 12. Oh. Free. Yeah. Right. Look at
is
the
there
kind
an element of charity built into your business, or this is
we are doing with our partner Tata AIG, right? Okay. So we pay some premium, right? Oh. And that premium is built into the pricing model, where it's not like we are doing a lot of parents, when they see this product, they consider FinanceSphere as God, right? Because they can't believe that this kind of product exists. How can you give something free of cost, right? Insurance and everything. And recently something happened to one parent. We have around 30,000-40,000 plus people currently who are accessing the service. One parent is actually died, and FinanceSphere and they were like, wow, if this insurance piece would not have been there, then probably their kids next education might have been in trouble, right? So the way Nitya was talking about trust, lending business is actually built upon trust anyway, right? Any money related transaction is built on trust, right? So here we are trying to create a trust for the parents, we are trying to create a trust for the school, right? So if school is getting the money, working capital on day one, then the school is never going to say no, right? Because they can use that working capital somewhere else. Whereas the parent is still paying in monthly installments and they are getting more number of installments rather than quarterly. We are asking them just pay in monthly, right? So it's a win-win situation for the parent, for us, and for the school. So there is nothing to lose for anybody. And that's why this innovative idea actually works. And we are not doing, people think that we are doing for charity. No, we make money. Yeah.
So could you give us some idea of the numbers? How much worth of fees you have paid? You must have paid in last calendar year, the 2020 year.
Oh, we see this, as I said, we started the company as a P2P lending company, right?
Sure.
And after 1 year, we started this model. In 2 years, we have done close to 80-90 crores of fees financing, given the support to the parents. That means that's the amount we are talking about in terms of disbursals.
And what will be the number of schools you are associated with?
Oh, that is huge. So currently, we are around 3,000 schools partners with us. But looking at the number of disbursal that we have done, you might see the number is less because a lot of school came this year to us.
Okay.
So yeah, and there is a challenge in executing this, especially in COVID year, doing it entirely, right? Because a lot of school which were partnered with us, a lot of them actually, if you look at, they have a message given to the parents that during COVID year, you may not pay the fees. A lot of school actually facing those problems, right? So those conversion has not happened. Otherwise, you could have seen double, triple the number that I'm talking about actually.
Okay. Nitya ji, these are last set of questions. I'll start with you commenting upon the ticket size. This pay later business, for smaller amounts, does it work? I mean, the logic says that if I have a smaller kind of a bill to pay, okay, I'll pay later. Have you seen any kind of shift or growth in the average ticket size of the customer? How is it going up? Has it like gone multiple times up, or is it like what is it? If you can throw some data and number around pay later model. And you're on mute, sir.
The classic Zoom problem, yeah. So the way we think about it is, and how we are building our businesses, we believe that if we are able to engage a consumer, then they will use Simple for everything, right? And therefore we over-index on engagement. I'll give you an example. An average customer uses Simple roughly 8 times in a month, okay, for all sorts of transactions.
And this average customer is a resident of a bigger city or a smaller city?
Yeah, typically 80%, 75 to 80% of our customers would be in a tier 1 city, Mumbai, Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, Chennai, and so on, right? So yes.
Delhi. Is Delhi not part?
Delhi, Noida, Gurgaon, the whole 9 yards, yeah. And this customer is also a millennial and employed, English speaking typically, and very much native to mobile, what I call, right? So these people are in their normal life using services like Uber, Netflix, Spotify, Gaana, Saavn, Amazon, etc. Very savvy customer. They have access to pretty much everything. Debit cards. They don't have credit cards for the most part yet, but they have debit cards, they have UPI, they have wallets, etc. And they use Simple for an experience of online purchases. So to answer your question, in our case, we have seen overall ticket sizes now double than, let's say, pre-COVID levels. And the reason is less about what we are doing. It's just like more, our business is a two-sided marketplace. We are adding merchants on one end, consumers on the other end. And as we are adding more and more merchants, just the use cases keep on diversifying. So it's not something that we are trying to do very hard, but it's just happening. But yeah, so for instance, I would say pre-COVID, if an average transaction size was 200 rupees, right now is about 450, 500 rupees. But that's, the right way to think about it. It's just not one loan transaction. It's typically, 7-8 transactions in a month, right? So 400-500 rupees, 7-8 transactions account for about 3,000-4,000 rupee of a bill, and people then pay that bill, right? So that's kind of like what we have seen, the bill sizes are now double, and it's primarily because of we are adding a lot of retailers. Just to give you a sense, in the last 3 months alone, we have tripled our number of retailers. So grown 3x. So of course, that means consumers are, using Simple in more and more places.
Thanks. Yogi ji, I'll put the last question to you. I just want your views on two specific points. In 5 years from now, how do you see your business, your ecosystem of specialized fintech companies lending to millennials? How do you see the future? Do you see a lot of M&A, mergers, acquisitions, buying out? How do you foresee this rolling out going forward?
So if you see in the next 4 to 5 years, probably COVID has already done some consolidation. The regulators and Google has done some consolidation. So probably the business will also do some consolidation over the next 3 to 4 years. I think you will see some of the new age banking licensing coming out, like the typical neo banking licensing coming out. So a lot of these fintechs which are doing some very specific and unique proposition from a consumer standpoint will be the first entrance into these new banks. So I think that's the real future, that you will have some level of market consolidation happening on one side because of business. There would be some new regulatory policies which will facilitate some of these fintechs morphing into a neobank proposition, which will be very, very specific to meet certain kind of consumer needs. You will have more digitization happening. So what you will see over a period of time is that more consumers being focused from paying cash and or through other methods of payment to coming onto digital. So that's I think that's the future, and probably that's not going to happen in 5, but maybe in 3 to 4 years.
Oh, that's right. So thank you so much, Yogi ji. Thank you so much, Devi ji. Thank you so much, Nitin. It was a very, very learning experience for me to talk to you guys about different segments that you represent, and it was a very engaging talk. Thank you so much for being part of this BW FinTech Festival.
Thank you, Ashish, and
Thank you, Ashish.
it's a pleasure, Nitya and Devi.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you, everyone.